Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm Brittnay Brown, and this is my colleague, Jane Love. We are with the Catawba Lands Conservancy and Carolina Thread Trail. What's not, I think, is well known that we are one organization. We just have two objectives. One side is land conservation, the other side is trails. And I'm sure many of you may be familiar with the Thread Trail, especially in Charlotte. We have several segments, but that actually spans over 15 counties around the Charlotte region, in 2 states, in North and South Carolina. The Catawba Lands Conservancy was founded in 1991. We were originally called SMILE, which is Save Mountain Island Lake for Everyone. The original founder was focused on protecting our drinking water source at Mountain Island Lake. And they saw the development coming in and saw how it was affecting the water quality in the area, and realized there was actually a market for land conservation here in Charlotte. We are your local land trust. We work out of 6 counties here in the Mecklenburg area. We do that by permanently protecting land through conservation easements or owning land ourselves, and I will get into that a little bit more later. As for the Thread Trail, and Jane will expound more on it later, the Thread Trail was adopted in 88 municipalities in the 15 county footprint it has, and that's a huge deal. Though those haven't been built out yet, we have about 400 miles on the ground. We are also a nonprofit. We work off donations. We love what we do. We get to be outside, but we're making a lasting impact in our region. Just to give you all a visual of our footprint. Everything you see in green are actual conserved areas, especially some of them are larger than others. And it's very hard to find large tracts of land for us to conserve in Mecklenburg County, just because land is so valuable here to be developed that people would much rather, develop it, which is okay. That's not a bad thing, but we're trying to have some balance between development and conservation. Go on. So I'll toggle between these 2 photos. I want to show you guys this photo. This is the Charlotte region in 1984. This is a satellite image. Very green. You don't see 485 just yet. And I'm going to show you an image of the Charlotte region in 2020. All right, well, still pretty green. I got to say, we're doing a pretty good job. You see 485 now. I'm going to toggle back, and I want y'all to pay attention to here in southwestern Charlotte and also in northern Charlotte. So it's a pretty dramatic change as they're growing, especially as the road networks are built out. It helps to promote growth. And again, growth and economic development are not a bad thing, but we have to be able to balance both. And our environment provides us with ecosystem services, right? So we benefit from the environment just existing. For instance, I will get into water regulation at the end of this, but food, we need farms, we need land, open land to provide us with food. Raw materials, we need forests to produce lumber. And something I'm going to focus strongly, or I'm going to give you all an example of something very close by. Water regulation. In 2018, I was the executive director at Nation Ford Land Trust, and this is another land trust in York County. Here we have the Nation Ford Greenway, which I was the steward of. But I had noticed over time we were having a lot of issues with erosion, and it was happening very quickly. I couldn't move the trails or reroute them fast enough to keep up with the erosion. As you can see, after a major rainstorm, the trail is gone. It's completely washed away in sections. And what you can't see here, just because the foliage is coming in through this early spring photo, there are houses right here. Too close. And I'm sure at one point in time they were within the building requirements to be so far away, have so much of a buffer from a water source. It may have been a 100-foot buffer, but they've lost land. Like, the land is eroded away. Now it's only 50 feet from the backyard of one of the neighbors to the stream. Well, this is a creek. that looks like a river, I think. It's also because of the lack of impervious surface. So as this is Sugar Creek, this flows through Charlotte, it flows through Fort Mill, and Fort Mill, if y'all are familiar with the area, has also grown tremendously as all of the suburbs of Charlotte are filling out, and people want to take advantage of convenient access using 77, 485, etc. We looked into several ways to help slow down this water, because when it's that much volume and velocity, that's where we're getting this erosion of the land. The solution was millions of dollars in cost to cut trees, pull up trees with the roots intact, cut them at the trunk and shove them into the bank using heavy machinery. So it'll probably cause some damage to even try to amend this situation. Which again, little tiny nonprofit land trust, we can't afford to do that. This is also between the boundary of York County and Lancaster County. So then you have two governments who would probably both, oh, no, that sounds like your problem. It also goes over the state line from North Carolina to South Carolina. Who's going to take responsibility? Because there's also still water coming from upstream that's not being absorbed into the ground. Those ecosystem services I'm referring to are, we need to have more pervious surface for water to soak into the ground instead of it being funneled into our waterways through storm drains. So one way we have less impervious surface, and through our specialty, is land conservation. We have 4 main focus areas. We work to protect farms, wildlife habitat. We would like to protect our water sources. And we also, through ourselves and through the thread trail, want to provide a connection to nature. So it means something to people. Our main mode of doing that is through conservation easements. For the most part, people come to us wanting to do this because their land that they have could have been in their family for generations. And because it means so much to them, they're willing to give up their rights to develop it forever. If you get into a conservation easement with us, although there are termed easements, that's not what we work in. This is in perpetuity. We will come to your land every single year to make sure how you designed your easement is still being, that you're still following the terms of your easement, or whoever is on that property in the future. It lasts forever. It follows the deed of the property. So you cannot put 10 homes on it. We maybe only agreed to allow you 1 more home site at a 5-acre footprint. We maybe said you set it up to where you're not allowed to clear cut. Well, if two landowners from then clear cuts the land and ignoring the easement, we have to take them to court. They have to make it right. So this is a great way to just make sure the land stays natural, or at least is used in the right way. So we wanted to keep it in a farm. We want to keep our farms farms. It's really hard to mediate soils after they've been not just graded, but also concrete poured on top. We also acquire land that we will own. We call these preserves, and we try to, in some cases, return them to their natural state. So the Carolinas were once known to have Carolina prairies. Grasslands, well, we see a lot of forests now and a lot of invasives taking over, so we will do a controlled burn on site, let the native grasses that are in the seed bank sprout and try to take over. And it takes a lot of time. These aren't easy one fix or one burn solutions. It takes a lot of time. But we do work with several partners, because there's not just one way to approach sustainability for our area. There are multiple approaches we can take. One of our solutions for Mecklenburg in particular was working with the city of Charlotte on the tree canopy preservation program. And this is a product of the city of Charlotte tree ordinance. If a developer is trying to develop their site, they are required to tree save. If they are unable to, for whatever special reason it may be, maybe the topography was bad, they need to put the retention pond there and they're limited on their space, well, they're required to pay the city a fee so that the city can go out with us, let's find a property that has trees on it still and permanently preserve it. And it's a great use of, with development comes in, then money is funneled elsewhere to protect land. We have currently saved, by the end of this year, we'll have approximately 300 acres under conservation easement with the city of Charlotte, which is just a great partnership to have. Conserving local farms. How do we keep our food local? If land is extremely valuable to develop right now, especially on the outskirts, as now the impact of Charlotte is impacting all of the surrounding counties, that land's too valuable not to pass up. And you don't really make a lot of money in farming. So that ends up being a lot of farmers' retirement plan, is to sell their land for development. And I get that. I think that's understandable. You can't live off of nothing. But we have attempted to work with, or not attempted, we are working with the Working Farms Fund. The Working Farms Fund is actually a initiative started by the Nature Conservancy. Y'all may have heard of that. They primarily buy land and hold, so everyone can get enough money. So it's helping all these agencies, even if it's the local government wanting to buy it for a park, us wanting to buy it because there's a rare or endangered species on it. The Nature Conservancy will hold it for us. Well, they've created their own initiative for Working Farms Fund. They want to see farmland protected. So they're trying to buy up land. We put a conservation easement on it, which lowers the value of the land, because now you can't have 500 homes on it. You can't put a shopping mall there. It's now cheaper. And some of the most difficult hurdle for a lot of farmers, especially those who are starting out, is access to land. That is very challenging because it's so expensive, especially here in the Charlotte area. Union County is actually ranked 13 in the United States for land use change, and that's loss of farmland. That's huge. North Carolina is number 2. The state of North Carolina ranked number 2 in the United States, and that was a study done by the American Farmland Trust. This Buy, Protect, Sell is such a wonderful program. It's something I would highly stress. If any of y'all are interested in learning more about it, please check it out. It is a wonderful program to help keep farmland productive and put new farmers on land when they couldn't afford it in the first place. And just one more thing I'd like to mention before I hand it over to Jane is the American Farmland Trust. We were awarded a grant from them this last year to help with succession planning. And like I mentioned, those farmers who don't have a retirement plan, or most farmers are at this age, or most farmers at this time, the median age for farmers is 58. That is very old. And it's hard to make sure that they have the right plan to not just sell their land as their retirement plan. So how do we get them set up to possibly put it into a conservation easement, get them paid? That is another way we can save land, is paying farmers, paying landowners to conserve their land, and it will be permanently protected. That succession planning helps them know about those options, because sometimes they just didn't even know it was available. It's all about educating them on their options and what they can do in the future. Okay, and pass it off to Jane.
Hey everyone, I'm going to talk about the connection side of our organization, and that's the Carolina Thread Trail. So the Thread Trail has been around since 2007, not as long as the Catawba Lands Conservancy. You see, our footprint is basically all around Charlotte, 15 counties surrounding Charlotte. This was a vision created for that area. As Brittnay said, it encompasses 88 municipalities. When it's all built out, it'll be 1,600 miles, and over 1,600 miles. Right now, 400 miles are in existence. And this includes trails, greenways, and what we call blueways, which can be called water trails. When you have a put in a point and a takeout point on a river, we can designate that as a blueway. Now, when I say trail, we at the Carolina Thread Trail, we use trail in a very broad way. We call a paved greenway a trail. We call, if part of our route is a bike lane and sidewalk, we call that's part of our trail. So throughout this presentation, I may say trail. Sometimes I'll say trails and greenways, but I'm generally using trail in a very broad way. We've always had a catalytic role We are the promoters of the regional vision. These cities and towns, they're out there building their greenways and they're doing a good job. They aren't necessarily looking at how someone can use the greenways to get from their city to 2 towns over. And that's what we're trying to do, to make these longer connections that people can use throughout the region. We help out by providing grants to the municipalities. We've been doing this since 2009. We've provided over $8 million in grants. Now that's a lot of projects when you divide that up over the years. We're not usually paying for the whole cost of the project. The cities and towns often will use our match to use our funds as a match against state and federal funds when they are pursuing grants at those levels. So not only are we partnering with the Catawba Lands Conservancy, we are also partnering with local governments. They are, in many cases, the trails that you see designated as Carolina Thread Trail are actually owned and maintained by the local governments. In the beginning, a lot of the initial segments of the Carolina Thread Trail were on the preserves that Catawba Lands Conservancy owned or had under easement, because that was low-hanging fruit. But as time went on, more and more of the mileage has been provided by cities and towns and counties. So after the vision was created, the implementation really got started by having a master plan for every one of the 15 counties. And this was a very local process. The locals know where the trails and greenways are feasible, and they helped identify the routes, and it went to the county commissions to be adopted as a Carolina Thread Trail master plan for that county. And then once you have that, it can be incorporated into land use plans and transportation plans. The state of North Carolina requires comprehensive transportation plans that identify not only the needs of highways, but also bicycle and pedestrian projects. And once that's in the comprehensive transportation plan, the planning agencies can have development set aside these corridors so that they can be used in the future. Sometimes developers, depending on local ordinances, developers might even build pieces of our greenways and trails. So it's been a locally driven process. Zooming in here on Mecklenburg County in particular, so far in the Carolina Thread Trail network, Mecklenburg has 79 miles completed. There are 11 blueway launches. The overall master plan includes over 170 miles. Zooming in even closer to a part of that, the Cross Charlotte Trail is an exciting corridor that's making a lot of progress. It'll be a 30-mile paved greenway. City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County have already built parts of it. And as you can see, once it's done, it's going to be an access for lots of people and to lots of jobs. And this is a good example of how some of the segments in our network kind of have 3 names. So for instance, Little Sugar Creek Greenway is the southern part of this Cross Charlotte Trail. The other greenways are the northern part of it. So Little Sugar Creek Greenway is that. It's also the Cross Charlotte Trail, and it's the Carolina Thread Trail. This is not all that different from roadways. Like Wilkinson Boulevard is also called US 29 and US 74. So when you're out there and you see a sign, you might see it called Little Sugar Creek Greenway, and then you might see a sign for Carolina Thread Trail. It's both. So our blueways, we have 4 rivers that are designated as blueways in the Carolina Thread Trail network: Catawba, South Fork, the Rocky River, and the Petey River over to the east. And they do connect communities. The South Fork, you can put in at the former community of Spencer Mountain, paddle down river past Lowell. There's a takeout in McCaddenville, or you could portage around this small dam and go all the way to Cramerton. So obviously we're all about trails, nice places to walk your dog. You may be wondering, what does it have to do that much with sustainability? Well, you might have seen this in other presentations, or you may see it, you may already know about this. Sustainability is spoken of. The metaphor for it is a 3-legged stool, because there's these 3 pillars: economic, environmental, and social. You can have something that may seem to be economically sustainable, but if you're using up all your environmental resources, eventually you can't keep doing that, so it wasn't sustainable. Or you could have something that's economically and environmentally sustainable apparently, but if it's not serving all types of people, eventually the oppressed will revolt or there will be a revolution which tears the fabric of society. So we had an economic impact study done. It was completed over a year ago. The Institute of Transportation Research and Education at NC State University conducted the study. We helped fund it along with Mecklenburg County and City of Mount Holly. And so the benefits of trails outlined in that study fall under these categories of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social. The economic benefits are business sales, the jobs and wages that come from people working at those businesses, and also tax revenue that goes to the community. So here's an example. This quote here is actually on the website of Charlotte Running Company, talking about their store in Rock Hill that's right on the River Walk Greenway, Piedmont Medical Center Trail. They are talking about the trail on their own website. We didn't ask them to do that. And Rock Hill owns and manages the trail, but they know it's an amenity for their business. So you can have, the bike shops, wine shops, breweries, cafes. All of these things are benefiting. It's really all about the users of the trail spending money. So in the study, the benefits were not just talked about, they were quantified and monetized. So these are annual benefits. We're not talking about benefits of like the actual construction, design and construction of the trail. We're talking about annual benefits that go to the businesses and government and individuals. So across the 6 trails, and these trails were in Mount Holly, McAdenville, Cramerton, Concord, Rock Hill, and Matthews. Just these 6 trails, you see I have it here listed, the total across all 6 trails, the average impact per trail mile per year, and the range that was on each of the 6 trails. They ranged from in variable amounts. But so the number of jobs supported by trails and greenways per year on these 6 trails would be 15. The wages, that's 770,000 per year per trail mile. Economic output are business sales, and this includes direct and indirect. So direct would be that primary transaction. You buy something from the cafe, and then they have to turn around and buy more of their ingredients from other businesses, and those are the indirect sales. So those were both included in these calculations. $2.1 million per year per trail mile. Tax revenue includes local, state, and federal. That's $262,000 per year per trail mile. Now, this study only looked at 6 trails, like as I said, but we have many more trails out there. So you could imagine how much more benefit there is. It's probably not linear, I don't know, but it's definitely going to be more the more trail you have. So on the environmental side, obviously the benefits of trails and greenways would be providing a way for people not to use cars. Our trails and greenways are not only recreational, they can be used for school and work trips. A good example over on the right, again, your far right, the Little Sugar Creek Greenway obviously provides a lot of neighborhoods with access to jobs. But then also there's congestion related to events. Over in Gaston County, if you live in this region, you probably know about Christmastown, USA. From December 1st to December 26th, McAdenville has many, many cars driving very slowly through their town. Now, it's better than it used to be. When I was young, a child, everyone drove there. Nowadays, people sometimes drive there early, park, and walk around. But when our trail is completed, and there's only a few small gaps in this connection between Cramerton and McAdenville, when that's done, a lot of people could just walk or bike to those Christmas lights. There's another aspect to environmental sustainability. It's not just about taking vehicle trips off the road. There's a land use side of things. The less we need cars, the less we have to use land for parking lots. And this goes back to conservation in a couple ways. Not only is that land not having to be covered in asphalt, but the runoff from that parking lot is not going into streams, and it's carrying all these petroleum products with it. So one of the challenges in this environmental realm is how, over decades and decades of driving, there's been free parking that just incentivizes driving. It's not really free because we're all paying an environmental cost. And so when we pay for parking, remember, it's internalizing the cost so instead of passing it on to the next generation. There's a book out there you may have heard about. Donald Shoup has written The High Cost of Free Parking. So in the study, the monetized benefits, it looked at not only the reduction in vehicle emissions, but also carbon storage and sequestration that is accomplished in the trail buffers. So overall, across the 6 trails, there's 90,000 total per year per trail mile. That's per year. Per trail mile, it's 7,000 per year. This is looking at carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and particulate matter. So they used they went out on the trails and did surveys of the trail users, and then they extrapolated that into an annual number of users. And from the survey information, they knew like travel behavior, and how much. They asked them questions about, if this trail and greenway wasn't here, would you have driven somewhere? And in that case, that was a vehicle trip eliminated. Or would you have driven further to get the same kind of experience? In that case, they calculated how much further, and that would be a trip reduced. And they created user profiles. So they didn't assume every single person out there was eliminating a vehicle trip, but based on the surveys they did, they created profiles and then extrapolated that. So the carbon storage and sequestration, we talk about these preserves that the Catawba Land Conservancy has, but it's not just that area that can store carbon. These 200-foot buffers, they assumed a 200-foot buffer on each side of the trail for this study. And they didn't assume it was all forested. They looked at a national database of land cover, and there are different rates of storage and sequestration for each of those types of land cover. And so they applied that and estimated the amount of carbon in metric tons. And then there are US DOT benefit cost analysis guidance has the monetized value per metric ton. And so they factored it by that. So these 6 trails buffers provide 115,000. This is a value as in avoiding a social cost. 115,000 per year per trail mile value in costs avoided, such as pollution. So the third leg of that stool is the social sustainability. And what we're talking about here is how trails and greenways are meeting the needs of human beings and honoring their rights. Some of these benefits that are related to trails obviously are health, physical and mental. People need interaction. They're getting that out on the trail. Equity, the trails are available for all. And then, like I said before, I'll change the order of these slides, so it's actually not later, but like I said before, these trails are providing wages, which helps individuals meet their own needs. So in the study, the type of social benefit that was measured was healthcare savings. And again, they took those user surveys, calculated the amount of physical activity people were getting, extrapolated that to an annual amount. And then the US DOT guidance again provides a monetized factor. So it came out to 310,000 per year per trail mile in healthcare savings. And that's like avoiding doctor appointments, avoiding ER visits, reducing the amount of medicine you have to buy. That's the kind of savings that it's behind that. There are still some challenges with social sustainability. We talked about equity. The trails are free, but not everyone is out there in proportionate numbers. So we've had some good sessions at our trail forum. We have once a year, we have a conference, a one-day conference in December. And one aspect of that is proximity versus access. You can have a trail or park that's close to you, but it doesn't mean that you can use it or that you want to use it. We had Mitch Silver with the New York, he was formerly with the New York Parks and Recreation Commissioner. He had a great presentation talking about how they looked at parks in neighborhoods, and you can look on a map and think that neighborhood is being served, but you go out there and you realize the park is not, it doesn't have the right kind of programming that culture around it wants, or it has a horrible road that you have to cross to get to it. So it wasn't being used. And the same thing for trails and greenways. You can have it right in sight, but maybe you can't get to it. Another aspect is the awareness and whether people feel welcome. We had a Earl B. Hunter Jr. founded a business called Black Folks Camp 2, and he provided a really interesting presentation also at our trail forum. And he emphasizes that it's not just about access. It really is, sometimes people aren't aware and they haven't been invited to go out there. A lot of times, if you think back to your first hiking trip, you were probably invited by someone like your parent or a friend. So the good news is that we can all address this pretty easily by just inviting someone who doesn't look like us to go on a hike with us. And that's what Mr. Hunter has said to our audiences. So the three-legged stool is all about balance, as Brittnay was talking about balance earlier. And they all work together. An example of that is how the environment of places helps the economy of places, because workers and businesses are looking for a good quality of life. And so the Catawba Lands Conservancy and the Carolina Thread Trail are both helping the quality of life, conserving land, and connecting lives to nature. And we hope that you would like to get involved in our mission as well.
A few times a year, we like to have some guided hikes and show people some of the trails in our region. We actually just had all 15 counties in our footprint. We had guided hikes. Last Saturday was National Trails Day, but we do have them several times a year. So please go on our website and you get to explore some trails because maybe you didn't know were nearby. We also have pop-up picnic. That's a fundraising event for CLC, and that'll be in mid-October. And as Jane already alluded to, Trail Forum, we had our 15th annual Trail Forum last year. It is sold out the last 2 years in a row. It keeps growing, and would love to see you all there. For volunteering, we do invasive species removal. We're trying to improve the health and quality of our natural areas. And we also do have trail work days. If you want to get really sweaty and dirty, we have plenty of trails that we need help keeping up with. And we also do outreach events several times a year.
On our website, you can find a way to donate. You can do it either as a one-time donation, or you can do honorarium or set up a memorial. And then if you are looking to get out there and hike or bike, we have an online trail map that shows all the existing parts of the Carolina Thread Trail network. And you can filter it by whether you want to hike or bike, or if you're looking for a trail that's at least 4 miles long or 2 miles, or if you only want a natural surface trail, you can filter it in all these different ways. So some of the examples here in Mecklenburg are Stewart and Irwin Creeks Greenway. Up in Davidson, they have a nice greenway system that includes several greenways. Toby Creek is right up there near the UNCC main campus. And I've already mentioned Little Sugar Creek, and Clark and Mallard Creeks Greenway also to the northeast. So the trails are waiting for you. I like to use that picture. There's lots of ways to connect with us. We have our website, of course, and Facebook, Instagram. Thank you all, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Yes, ma'am.
Couple quick questions. Is that report available online? Can we see it?
Yes, definitely. If you go to our website, you go to the little menu up on I guess it's up on the right now. And Why Trails Matter is the menu you want to pick, and it has it on there.
And that's the Thread Trail website.
That's right, okay. And what about like an app for the trails? That can work?
We don't have an app, but the website, you can use it on your mobile device.
And one last question. I live in unincorporated Mecklenburg County. I know you talked about the tree canopy program earlier. Is that just city of Charlotte, or
Anywhere within Mecklenburg County will purchase land to save the tree canopy.
So this is a question about the Catawba Land Conservancy. So is it a group of like conservation land use lawyers, or do you outsource out to law firms in order to handle those conservationships?
Well, we do have staff who do have backgrounds in law. However, for some of our transactions, we do seek outside counsel, but primarily, I mean, we're a staff of, total now, what, 21 between the two organizations, or one organization, two initiatives. We all have various backgrounds to kind of cover this, and it still is run as like a normal nonprofit. Yes.
I would learn more about the seasonal processes. Obviously, you mentioned learning earlier, and like volunteer events. At what time of the year would you say was going to be confident?
So it depends on the invasive species, because some of them produce seeds at different times. It's the last time we want to mess with them, because then the seeds are dispersing and then we're kind of creating a new problem for ourselves. But yes, it depends. Using glyphosate. You don't want maybe volunteers to use that, because you kind of have to have a special license and know not to use it within a certain distance of a waterway. So we also do cutting down privet, autumn olive, trying to remove kudzu. Would love to have you come learn all these different things. Just please check on Catawba Lands Conservancy website for some of those basic. And I know, sir. All right, so you put up your hand.
I just want to ask for the social leg about trails. Is there any consideration around like safety, or how much of an impact do you have on helping people feel safe when they're on trails?
You mean safe from like assault or personal injury, or are you talking about traffic safety, or?
All of it. Really.
Okay. Well, our study didn't cover that. We are in the process of, we're going to fund a crime study. It's going to look mainly at some of the rural segments, because we are going to use the findings of the crime study to help advance part of the Over Mountain Big Tree Trail, which is in Cherokee County in South Carolina. And the park, it's actually part of the National Park Service, but it's a long trail, but the part in our network is in Cherokee County. So we are going to be looking at crime on trails. There have been a lot of studies in the past about crime on trails, and generally they find that trails are no more dangerous than walking down the street or living beside the street. A lot of property owners, it's not just the trail users, but property owners have concerns about, when you're proposing a trail or greenway, is it going to bring criminals into my backyard? So that's why we are doing a crime study. But I think there probably are studies out there that have looked at definitely perceptions of the people have about trails and greenways and whether they're safe, but I don't have that on the top of my head. Good question.
So near where we live, there's a greenway segment that's under construction, and it runs along Long Creek. And something that, like the initial, it's so shocking just to see the initial construction, because where there was super wood, beautiful woods along Long Creek, it's just like, and I trust there's like a long-term play there for the creek health and all that, but like, so could you speak to that a little bit? Because it just seems like it just came out of a wildlife conservation conversation, and then we're just like, oh my God, and then like the water is so muddy, and just think about all the wildlife trying to survive right now while this construction's going on. So could you talk to us a little bit about?
Yeah, so Mecklenburg County is doing that project, and part of it is a stream restoration, stream bank mitigation. So probably what was happening, I wasn't up there when it was all wooded, but it could have been that back, in the woods, the creek banks are actually very steep and they're eroding. So to do that, you have to change the slope of the stream bank. So you do have to cut down some trees, and then you plant grasses and types of shrubbery that stabilize the stream banks. So it is, I know, looking like a scar on the land when you do construction, but eventually it does look good, and you won't people might remember the way it used to look, but it will look good again.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about how it looks and more about like the wildlife and the health of the creeks and all that, so what you're saying, I hear you're saying is like there is a long-term health of the environment
Yeah.
thing going on.
Mhm.
I believe some of that land is also under conservation easement with Catawba Land Conservancy as well. Yes.
Quick question, you mentioned the 30-mile trail. I thought, what's the status of that? Like, what's the longest segment? How long is this? 2 miles?
Well, Little Sugar Creek Greenway is done, and that's over 17 miles. And then there are pieces of it going north. City of Charlotte is working on a piece between like Old Concord Road and or Rocky River Road and something else. I have to look at a map, but up closer to the university, Toby Creek Greenway near the university is already on the ground, and that's part of it. I can't remember how many miles that is, but so when it's all done, I don't know how many miles that will it be. 30 miles is what it said. Yeah. So a lot of it, yeah, I would say over half of it is existing already.
A couple of quick questions. So for you, can you let us know that compensation packages that you discuss with the farmers, is it sort of all in the same sort of compensation that they would get if they sell on?
So no, and here's what happens. There was 2 organizations I had listed on there that I didn't dive too much into, but they're called ADFT, which is through the state of North Carolina. And then there's ASEP ALE, and that is through the federal government. They will pay you, one will pay you 25% of the easement value, and that is determined on how many rights you are going to give up. And then the other agency will pay you 50% of your easement value, which typically ends up being about half of your property value. That's our estimate. And that landowner is required on the ADFP grant to donate 25%, which actually helps you out in the long run, because you won't have to pay taxes or as much in taxes on that property. So it's not only permanently protected, but you also, for the next 15 years, have a federal tax rate equal to the easement value. So you can deduct 50% of your income tax for 15 years.
And just 2 quick questions for you. The first is the Cross Charlotte Trail, so it butts up to York County. Is there any plan? Are there any plans to sort of go into York County as well?
Yes, there are some trails that exist in York County, but right there at the state line, there's a feasibility study going on where actually Little Sugar Creek also comes in Little Sugar Creek Greenway. So how that continues and gets down to the Founders Trail and the the Piedmont Medical Center Trail that are already existing, right, going through Fort Mill there. So yeah, it's being studied, like how you can get the route through there.
Then one other quick question. So just looking at that, I had a different question, but looking at that, it brought up a question on my mind. So I live in the Raleigh area, and so the trails that I walk around the lake and the Greenway, they come out very regularly throughout the week, like cleaning off the trail, blowing the trail. Is there any consideration or any studies done about how that impacts because of the number of times they're out there with machinery, driving out? Literally, my Greenway, it seems like they clean it almost every day.
Like leaf blowing and stuff,
Yeah,
or
leaf
grass
blowing,
blowing and blowing.
even in the woods.
Yeah, I don't know a study like that, but I definitely feel your pain. Seems like, like leaf blowers are everywhere, but and the landscaping industry, that would be an interesting question, the environmental impacts of landscaping industry.
Yeah.
But
noise
Can you-
pollution.
Can you use more electric vehicles to sort of decrease,
The noise pollution.
yeah, the noise pollution and the air quality as well?
yeah, the local governments are doing a lot of the maintenance. We do some of our own trail maintenance on those trails that are on preserves. And yeah, we're out there with weed eaters. but yeah, it's a difficult question, like how to get it done
Yeah.
regularly, but not have negative impacts.
Any correlation between where you put the greenways and trails and increasing and decreasing along this area?
As in litter or?
Litter, yeah.
Well, let's see, I don't think we see too much litter on our trails. Our trails tend to be more remote and maybe, they're not as easy to get to, and people that bother to go out there appreciate trails. I think that would be a good question for the public works departments for the local government. So I don't know as much about that, but mhm.
Another question, kind of regarding, I guess, this might be a two-part question. So thinking about, especially in the south, with the trails, where they're having, like, where the plans are. So I guess impact on migratory animals, and then also, if like the lands that are chosen, if they're already indigenous lands, like, do they also have a right to like claim, like, we can have this, but still like considered their sovereign land instead of now becoming property of the state? Those might be two separate questions.
That's a good point about the wildlife does use trails and greenways there. We have wildlife cameras on some of our preserves, and yeah, deer will take a path right there that's provided, easy route for them. And sometimes if you have a bike and ped bridge over an interstate, that's saving wildlife. That's saving animals' lives. How many times do you see animals that got stuck against the concrete barrier in the middle of the interstate? I hate seeing that. But yeah, so not only are they using remote trails and greenways, but they could use bike ped bridge. And about the indigenous, we do have a designated thread trail that's on Catawba Nation's land down in South Carolina. So they created the trail, and they agreed to have it designated as Carolina Thread Trail as part of the network. And the public can use it. They allow people onto their reservation. Yeah.
So, my name is Brittnay, I'm a sheriff, but I also sat on the board of directors for Child Rights and post group quite a bit. So it's a great event, if no one knows about it, it's awesome event that really anyone can get involved with. They work with local restaurateurs, and each restaurateur donates food, and then Child Trail auctions it off, and everyone gets together, and they have great programs. But I think, so there's that, and then the other thing is, you're talking about wildlife, there is an extensive program which you used to do to protect the little frog that you had. And so there was this small little, frog bar that everyone, like all the children were so involved with in fundraising with all the schools. And I think that, we were at a session before, talking about sort of how, people get involved at all levels. And, looking at the youth as, sort of the next generation to take over. And I think the more that you continue to do with children, especially at the school, because you've got such an amazing program, and it's so strong and it's so evident, that's sort of the future board members of Child Trail. That, I think that you were involved in all of the events. You're always at the Rocking Center. You have a lot to do with, children in the park, and I just think that your organization is great.
Thank you for
Yeah.
Thank you for plugging the pop-up picnic and the other programs. We do have a biologist on staff, and so there's a variety of programs. Thank you.
Can you talk about accessibility to your trails for people with disabilities and what you do to kind of accommodate that?
Yeah, so you can filter for that kind of thing on the website too. Some of the trails are ADA compliant, some of them are not. So oftentimes at a more remote trail, what's provided is something, an experience is provided for the ADA needs. It won't be exactly what is the other trail, but it will be some kind of compatible, somewhat similar experience is provided in some places, but not everywhere.
Is there any legislation in place or on the books potentially that has a negative impact on your efforts with regard to placement of trails?
Oh, a negative impact. Well, I know that in planning, I have a planning background, and something that comes up is whether trails and greenways and stimulate gentrification. I imagine there are some studies out there about that. You know, I think a lot of things, I think it would be hard to say it's just the trail or greenway that does that. I mean, an area kind of becomes popular for a number of reasons. And property values go up and then property taxes go up. And so if that's not the kind of negative impact you're thinking about, or were there other ones?
Is there anything that's prohibit, that like sort of is a barrier to you being able to?
Oh, to being able to accomplish the trails. Yeah, like I was talking about before, property owner perceptions, they tend to picture this trail is going to be like this weedy, narrow thing that nobody normal is ever out there. It's always just going to be a bunch of shady criminals. But actually, the more users will be out there and they will be providing eyes on the trail. And sometimes what happens is a neighborhood will protest the idea of a trail being through their neighborhood, and they'll insist on a fence being put up, and the fence will be provided. The trail builder will add that and increases the cost of building the trail. And then later, once the trail is there, those property owners might put a gate into the fence so that they can get to the trail.
Like what Jane's talking about, the visibility of the Nation Ford Greenway in Fort Mill, the neighbors were upset at the idea of it being there, but turns out there was Santeria occurring in the woods, and now that it was being, now that the trail was actually being used, and they were being visited, they were witnessed doing this, it stopped because now there's too many people and too many eyes. So that helped actually deter some of that from occurring.
Yeah, and there's other hurdles too. Funding is always a big hurdle. But,
Was that term used, Santeria?
Santeria. It's kind of like black magic witchcraft. It's I think it came from the Caribbean originally. But yes.
Yeah, one hurdle with federal funding is a source there's a lot of federal funding out there for bike ped projects, but a lot of, like in North Carolina, the state funds in the legislation cannot be used for standalone bike ped projects. The federal funds that flow through the state will be used for that, but the local governments have to come up with the required 20% match, which can be a lot for the local governments. And then if the cost goes up, they find out, oh, we don't have enough matching funds after all. We have to give the money back. And then the project doesn't happen. So that's another hurdle related to cost and funding. Did you have?
Just to extend the question with regards to, is there barriers for you when you're thinking about, okay, let's extend the trail here? For example, if a site has industrial operations or had industrial operations, how does that impact your ability to plan or implement trails?
Yeah, like brownfield sites. It definitely, I mean, it's definitely something to consider. Maybe you would like route it somewhere else to avoid the area, or it's probably not, I mean, putting a trail there is probably not the same kind of process as trying to put a development there. But there are some trails in industrial areas, but yeah, you'd have to do some environmental studies. That adds to the cost. But.
So just curious, so what would be a deterrent, like if they were polluting the air in a certain way, or
Oh, like what makes it a brownfield? Like in the past, if there was a dry cleaning operation on the site or a gas station, that underground fuel tanks, those are kind of hazards that you might, chemicals that have built up in the soil because of improper disposal of things. Certain businesses are categorized as making it a brownfield.
and just for the conservancy part of it.
About brownfields, well, we typically don't want to conserve that because there's every potential project we have, there are standards that we have to follow set by LTA, and one of those, and it's Land Trust Alliance. One of those is to perform an environmental study, environmental phase 1 on site. We don't want to take on lands that don't have conservation value. So if it's completely covered in privet, not as extreme as a brownfield, but it probably doesn't have very high conservation values, we wouldn't want to spend our resources and our time on acquiring said property. In the case of a brownfield, we won't take it. So that's, it just, we don't want to, there's also a liability with taking a site like that that hasn't been remedied by DEP.
So I have a question. So this is for the land conservancy. Excuse me. So I've actually been interested in actually starting my own animal wildlife sanctuary or preserve. And I know, cause there's an app called the Nextdoor app.
Yeah.
And I've noticed there's been a lot of issues with people complaining about wildlife. But what people aren't understanding, like in Charlotte with all these developers, you know, there's not enough land for these animals to go. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what do you guys do in regards to dealing with wildlife and the city doing so much in development? Like, are you guys working on preserving land for the animals, or do you guys help with relocating them to other areas? Like, what do you guys do part of that?
No, we do not transfer animals to other sites, and it's not really in our wheelhouse. We do conserve land primarily, and as one of our focus areas for wildlife habitat. The challenge becomes, we can't always get land where it may be needed most, because it may be just too expensive to acquire, or no one's donating it. That may not be possible. What does happen is the environment does correct itself. You know, population will crash and then meet numbers that the environment can sustain. So that's an unfortunate side effect of some of these things. I know that there's an example right now in TPK. I live in South Carolina myself, and the town of TPK, they've had so many deer and so many cars have struck the deer. They're saying these are a danger or a nuisance. And also, when the populations do get too dense, they can transfer diseases very easily amongst each other. And that can be a painful, terrible death for these diseases. I forget the name of the disease that has been transferring among deer right now. That is chronic wasting disease. Thank you. And the town of TPK has decided they're putting their funds together and they're going to exterminate a large portion of the population. There are people who are just vehemently angry about this, and there are other people like, well, it's for our safety. So it's really hard to satisfy everyone. And we also want to see the wildlife protected, but we also don't want to see the population get so big that there are now transmitting diseases and dying horrible deaths. So it's really hard to kind of make everything work together. But have you heard of Rescue Ranch? If this is what you're interested in, there, I think northern Mecklenburg County, maybe in Iredell, you should look into, that's what they do there, wildlife rehabilitators.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Beth, did you have a question? Or-
I don't know if there's time. No, but I'm just curious, maybe for you to, I mean, obviously, to conserve land is a huge amount of work. It's being agreed by lots of property owners. I'm curious for the red trail right now, how much is conserved?
What, how many
How many times
acres?
is conservation?
Total, including preserves, we have 18,000 acres, protected permanently.
On the red trail, well, yeah.
Sorry, on Red Trail specific, I should have said that at the beginning of the, go on. What was the question about how much is?
Yeah, like with the Carolina red trail, how much is conservation easement as well? Like, is there a protected area around the trail?
7 properties that I
Yeah.
know.
There are 7 trails that we maintain. I don't know how many acres that adds up to. And then, so it's only those are the ones that are protected. The trail buffers that are easements that the local governments have. I mean, those are protected in a way because they're a trail easement. But in truth, they have variable widths. So I've never done the calculation about how much is protected that way.
And it could be on parks that are protected, but I know that y'all probably have lunch going on. Is there anything else we can ask or answer? Please come up to us, but thank y'all so much.